The government just moved inside your AI and you didn't sign off on it. $42.6 billion. That's the size of the stake Sam Altman just offered to hand the United States government for free. No cash changing hands, just 5% of OpenAI gifted to Washington. And here's the part nobody is saying out loud. If you run your business on Frontier AI, the regulator who's supposed to police these companies is about to become their shareholder. Same desk, both jobs. That changes the risk on every AI decision you'll make this year. Let me show you why. Let's establish what actually happened because three stories broke in the last month and everyone reported them separately. That's the mistake. They're all one story. So, the first story. On 2nd July, the Financial Times reported that Sam Altman offered the US government a 5% equity stake in OpenAI, worth roughly $42.6 billion at their $852 billion valuation. Not a sale, a gift. And not just OpenAI. His proposal asks every leading American AI lab to pay a matching slice into a public fund modeled on Alaska's oil revenue vehicle. The second story. For most of June, Anthropic's most advanced models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5, were switched off worldwide, not by choice, by US export controls. The first ever applied to an AI model instead of a computer chip. Access came back on July 1st, but only after Anthropic accepted expanded pre release government access and joint research teams. The third story. Step back, and the pattern is undeniable. In one quarter, an executive order asked Frontier Labs for up to 30 days of pre release access. The government's testing body signed evaluation deals with Google DeepMind, Microsoft, and XAI. GPT 5.6 shipped only under government approval. Tech Policy Press called it an unprecedented expansion of federal oversight, and that was written before the equity offer. Now, why should a leader in London, Singapore, Sydney care about American politics? So, United States, your frontier vendor may soon be a part owned by your regulator. Board level conflict of interest exposure baked into your core AI stack. For United Kingdom, you're already fighting an integration crisis. Now add the models you're integrating answer to a foreign government's release schedule. And Singapore, the most governance forward market in Asia. Your MAS and IMDA frameworks assume vendor independence. What happens to that assumption when the vendor's largest new stakeholder is a foreign state? And Australia, high AI ambition, low readiness, you're building national capability on models that can be switched off worldwide by a policy decision made in Washington. Four economies, one exposure. The wall between the state and frontier AI just dissolved, and it's holding up your architecture. So, the twist here's what every headline got wrong. The coverage framed these as three business stories, a funding maneuver, an export dispute, a regulatory trend. Read the room that way, and you'll miss the only thing that matters. After 15 years in enterprise architecture and consulting, I've learned to watch one thing above all else where the control actually sits, not who owns the logo, who can flip the switch. And in the last 90 days, the answer has changed. Think about what a government stake actually does to your risk model. For your entire career, regulatory risk and shareholder interest lived in two different columns. The regulator constrains the company. The shareholder wants the company to win. Opposite forces. You could reason about them separately. When the government becomes both, those columns collapse into one, and you can no longer predict which force wins on any given decision. Will Washington push OpenAI towards safety as a regulator or towards revenue as a shareholder holding $42 billion of upside? Nobody knows. This is the new risk. not a bad outcome, an unpredictable one. And unpredictable is the one thing that enterprise architecture cannot absorb. Then layer Anthropic on top. A frontier model went dark for a month globally by government order. Every enterprise that standardized on a single model just learned something they should have known already. Your AI vendor has a kill switch, and you're not holding it. Here's the deeper read, the part I want you to sit with. We spent 3 years debating AI alignment. Will the model do what we ask? We were watching the wrong layer. The real question was never whether the model is aligned with you. It's whose hands are on the infrastructure the model runs on. Alignment was a distraction. Control was the story all along. This is the oldest lesson in the history of critical infrastructure. Every technology that becomes essential, railways, telephony, electricity, and the airwaves, eventually gets absorbed into the state. Not through nationalization, through entanglement. The government doesn't seize it, it sits down inside it. We are watching that happen to artificial intelligence in real time in a single financial quarter, and almost nobody has put it on their risk register. So what do you actually do on Monday? 3 moves. Write it down. Move 1. Add government entanglement as a line item in your AI vendor's risk model this week. Your vendor risk register probably scores uptime, security, and data residency. It almost certainly does not score state exposure. Whether a government can restrict, own, or switch off your vendor and add that row, score every frontier model you depend on. If the answer for your primary vendor is high, you have a concentration problem you did not know you had. Move 2. Build and document a model portability fallback path. Test it, don't just design it. Anthropic proved the kill switch is real. So answer one question in writing. If our primary model is restricted or export locked tomorrow, which model absorbs the workload? And how many hours does the switch take? If you can't answer in hours, model portability just became a business continuity requirement, not an engineering nice to have. Move 3. For a regulated workload, put a sovereign or regional alternative into your architecture review. This one is sharpest for my Singapore, UK, and Australia viewers. If your AI stack is entirely US frontier models, every one of your workloads inherits US release controls and now US ownership dynamics. You don't have to move anything. But for your regulated workloads, finance, health, government, a regional or open weight alternative belongs in the architecture conversation this quarter. Bring it to board as resilience, not as cost. Notice what none of these 3 moves are. None of them are panic and rip out your AI. The technology still works. What changed is who has their hands on it. And your job is to architect for that, not to retreat from it. Now, the story almost nobody covered, but if you're a leader, this is one thing that should keep you up at night. While Altman offered Washington 5%, Senator Bernie Sanders introduced a bill asking for 50, a one-time 50% tax paid in stock on every major AI company deposited into a public fund his office estimates could hold $7 trillion. Here's why that matters, even though it probably won't pass as written. The gap between Altman's 5% and Sanders' 50% isn't a disagreement about numbers. It's a bipartisan agreement about direction. When the socialist senator and the Silicon Valley CEO both agree, the public should own a piece of AI. And they are only arguing about how big the piece is. The debate is over. Public ownership of AI infrastructure is coming. The only open question is the percentage. For enterprise leaders, that's the real signal. The vendor you build on today may have a fundamentally different ownership structure in 18 months and a different set of masters. Watch the direction, not the number. The direction is set. So, your homework this week, Open your AI vendor's risk register, find the row for your single most important AI model. Now ask, does this row account for what government could do to this vendor, restrict it, own it, or switch it off? If that row doesn't exist, you just found your biggest blind spot. Add this before Friday. And here's the question I genuinely want your answer to, because I think the room is split. And I want to see where you land. If a government took an ownership stake in AI company you depend on, would that make you trust the technology more or less? Because half of you will say more, finally, accountability, and half of you will say less, now no one's independent. Both answers are defensible, and which one is right may define the next decade of enterprise AI. Drop your answer below. Tell me which market you're in: US, UK, Singapore, Australia, because I suspect the answer changes depending on where you sit. I read every comment. This is AI Unpacked. I don't tell you what happened, I tell you what to do about it. See you next week. This is Raj. Namaskar.